Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SOA webinar on the University Earned Credit Program. I'm Sharayla Rose, Director of Communications for the Society of Actuaries. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available after the event on SOA.org. If you'd like to ask a question to the presenters during their presentation or during the Q&A, you can enter those into the question box. Our presenters will give a half-hour presentation, and then we will move to your questions for the balance of the webinar. After the webinar, you will receive a short feedback survey to your registration email. Please take a minute to complete the survey, and thank you in advance for doing so. Your presenters today are Jennifer Gillespie, SOA President-elect, and Gina Long, SOA Director of Professionalism and University Relations. We will later be joined by SOA's Chief Executive Officer, Greg Heydrich, Managing Director of Education, Ken Guthrie, and SOA Senior Education Staff Fellow, Stuart Klugman, for the Q&A session. Thank you to each of our volunteers and staff presenters today.
Thanks, Sheree. As Sheree mentioned, I'm Jennifer Gillespie, and I am the president-elect, but I'm also, and maybe more importantly for today's conversation, the chair of the task force, which was charged by the SOA board with developing the details for the University Earned Credit Program after they had voted to go forward with it. So this empowers students to earn credit for select preliminary exams once they complete university courses with a sufficient grade and only at our CAE partner schools. We also, that's considered our core program. And then we've created an extension to that program, which will work with a pilot group of universities that serve populations that are really underrepresented in our profession, particularly in the United States, somewhat in Canada as well. And we will talk more about that a little bit later in today's discussion. Next slide, please. So why did the board approve university earned credit now when they haven't in the past? Excellent question, and one that all the members of the task force were asking, and I'm sure many board members over the course of the discussion asked it as well. But as the last several years, the board has been doing research and conducting interviews and getting a lot of feedback about the state of the profession and how things are changing, how the work that actuaries are doing is changing, and all of that input that was part of the long-term growth strategy. Out of that came the case for change for doing this kind of university-based education. Times have changed from what they were before, and we are competing for the best and brightest with other professions, and at the moment particularly it's data science. And while it's helpful for our actuarial candidates to know something about that, we don't want them to get so excited by data science and the fact that they can do that path without exams that we lose those best and brightest students for the profession. So the hope is that if we can make it a little more efficient for them to stay on the SOA path, we will retain them as actuaries. And furthermore, for many of our universities outside of North America, and maybe in Canada as well, we are competing for students with other actuarial organizations that do allow credit for their university work. And so this is a good way for us to keep those international students that are best and brightest as well as SOA members. Okay, so we look at, what's the reason to do it with the university-based education. And we know that professors, especially those who are actuaries, can teach it better than we each teach ourselves. I had to self-study all of it because I wasn't part of an actuarial program, and I'm sure I would have learned it better if I'd had professors teaching it to me. We have also gotten a lot of feedback from employers that EQ and AQ, which were emotional quotient and adaptability quotient, Those are things like judgment, communication, adaptability, and those are skills that employers want to see their actuaries have, and we think actuaries need to have to work with models and all of the adjustments and everything that will happen to keep people current. Those skills are easier to incorporate in the curriculum in a university setting, although we won't limit it to that. Certainly we will work some of it into the SOA pathway, and also it's skills that we're going to have to keep working on, each and every one of us, as we progress in our career. And then at our CAEs, there is a learning community that's devoted to the actuarial career with speakers and the actuarial club and all of the leadership opportunities that are part of that, the planning, the organizing of their events. There's internships and co-op opportunities, research opportunities, lots of things that are part of the environment that surrounds our actuarial students when they're at a CAE. Next slide, please. So there are two key components to the UEC program. The first one is our Centers of Actuarial Excellence Evaluation Committee, which has existed for the last 10 years or more, that looks at the whole program that a given university is putting out there for actuaries to make sure that it meets the 8 criteria that are listed. And that's going to stay in place, but we're going to add a second layer of supervision that looks specifically at the courses for which that university would like to be able to grant educational credit or exam credit for. So Gina will talk more about the in-depth supervision that's going to be happening with those schools. Next slide. So why just the CAE schools? And some of those things I've already mentioned. There's a whole community around the students that are in those schools. There's a connection to industry, speakers, advisors to the program. The faculty at CAE universities have more opportunity to incorporate sort of the most interesting new technology for tools that an actuary might want to use, or perhaps new materials. And they have faculty who are actuaries, so they're staying up to date with their actuarial knowledge. And then, as I mentioned before, it's easier for them to incorporate those additional adaptability and emotional quotient skills. They might have group projects or presentations or other kinds of things that are worked into their curriculum that help work on those skills. And now I'll let Gina go deeper.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. So let's take a look at the university's perspective for this program and see what they'll need to do to comply if they are interested in UEC for their students. So to be eligible, universities will need to have been a CAE for at least 2 years. Now, the majority of our universities that are CAE now have been CAE for 5, even 10 years. But if there's a new school that becomes a CAE, they will need to be a CAE for 2 years before they are eligible for this program. That way they will have had 2 full reviews prior to being eligible. They'll need to also apply for a minimum number of the preliminary exams that are included. Now, we have decided to include exams FM and exam SRM. And possibly 1 or 2 other preliminary exams. We will not be including exam P for a couple of reasons, and that is that it's not typically a material that is covered in the actuarial program at a university. And also exam P has become a screening tool that employers like to use, candidates like to use in the hiring process. Schools will need to have learning objective coverage at 85% or better for the courses for UEC, and this is higher than the 80% requirement for CAE currently. And the learning objectives will need to be covered in no more than 2 courses. So if it's an exam that requires a couple of university courses for coverage, that's fine. We don't want it spread out too thin over 3 or more courses. And again, as Jennifer mentioned, universities would need to demonstrate that they are providing AQ and EQ education and that it's incorporated across the program. Next slide. So if a CAE believes it meets those initial requirements, they will submit an application for UEC. And at that time, they would recommend a member of their faculty who is an SOA member to serve as their accreditation actuary. That's a new role that will be at the CAE schools in the faculty. The application materials for the schools will be available this July. And the first step in the application process, once you receive it, would be for the CAE evaluation committee to make sure that they are CAE and that they've had the status for at least 2 years. And then the application will move to the new UEC oversight committee that's being formed now. They will confirm the eligibility that we talked about on the previous slide. And then once that's confirmed, they'll recruit and assign an SOA member volunteer to serve as their external examiner. Now, this external examiner is really key to the evaluation process for UEC. And let's look at the details of that on the next slide. The external examiner will work hand in hand with the accreditation actuary at the school in the review and approval of the courses. They'll look to confirm the syllabus coverage is at that 85% or better. They'll look at there'll need to be a high percentage of the grading points for each course that are based on proctored examinations. So it can't be, group work, et cetera, that's making up the majority of the grade. Very high percentage will need to be proctored examinations. The external examiner will take a look at the final exam for the courses and ensure that it tests everything it needs to cover with regard to the exam topics, and that the final exam is cumulative for the whole course. Those will also need to be worth a minimum percentage of the grading points for the course. And with regard to exam security, we'll put in place requirements similar to those that we use for the SOA exam. So are there enough proctors for the number of candidates testing? Is there proper spacing between students? The exam needs to be new each term, can't be reused. The external examiner will also confirm that the pass mark for UEC, and that's not the pass mark to pass the class, but a higher mark that is required. It'll be a numeric requirement that is required to get the UEC credit. They'll make sure that that sits in the right place to show that the knowledge the student demonstrates in the course either meets or exceeds that of an SOA exam. The examiner will review and approve the grade results. And if there's any last minute, the pass mark for UEC needs to be raised a point or two, it can be done at that final stage as well. So with all that the external examiner is going to need to review and evaluate, it is important that they undergo very thorough training, and that will be done by the oversight committee and by SOA education volunteers familiar with those exams and staff to ensure that they're really prepared to properly evaluate those courses. Next slide, please. So from the student's perspective, they will need to be enrolled as degree-seeking students at a CAE university to be eligible for this credit. The task force and the board believe that it was important that candidates that receive this university-earned credit have the benefit and the advantage of the full CAE program, all the attributes of the program that we were talking about with the CAE program. And if you want to look at the 8 criteria for CAE, those are available on our website. But we felt it was important that a student has the opportunity to interact with the full program and get the benefit of that, rather than just coming to the school to take a one-off course and get credit. So students would then need to pass the UEC course that they're working on with the required mark for UEC, which again would be higher than the pass mark for the course. And if there were, in some cases, they would need to be 2 courses for a particular exam. The student would need the UEC mark in each course, and they'd need to complete those courses within a 2-year time frame. And then finally, the student would pay a fee to apply to the SOA and pay a fee to receive their exam credit. And they would just need to do that within 2 years of completing the final course needed. So that would give students a little bit of flexibility with when they would need to pay that UEC fee. And they would also be eligible for the same student discounts that are currently given for our exams. And let's take a look on the next slide at the timeline of how this will roll out. So the announcement went out just a little over a week ago, announcing the program. This is the week we are holding the webinar. So we had a member webinar earlier today in North America, and now this one, we'll have 2 candidate webinars on May 27th. That's Thursday. And I think we're going to add one more member webinar on Friday. So a lot of communication. We want to give everybody a chance to ask their questions. And then as we proceed with rolling out the program in late 2021, early 22, interested CAE universities will go through the application process. We are currently collecting expressions of interest from our CAE schools. So those are due by the end of May, but formal applications aren't due until October 15th. So then in the late part of the year, we will start the application process, conduct our site visits, in the early part of 22 and approve schools by mid 22. So this would mean that the first UEC courses to be given would be offered starting in the 3rd quarter of 2022. And a candidate who might have completed, say, an FM course in the last half of 2022 would be eligible to apply for their exam credit in early 23 if they met that pass mark bar for UEC. And now I'm going to hand it back to Jennifer, talk about the diversity opportunity.
Thank you, Gina. So as I mentioned earlier, the board also approved an extension of the university earned credit program for universities that serve populations of students that are underrepresented in the profession. And this is mostly really at this point a North American situation opportunity. And we're really talking about our Black students, Hispanic students, Native American students. So those are the kinds of universities that we're looking at. And rather than waiting and hoping that they'll come to us, we feel like we need to do something different than just doubling down on the same schools that are already educating actuaries. So the program will use a structure that we've created here for the university earned credit, but we'll have some additional support for those schools. Exam FM will be the only exam for which the non-CAE universities may apply to have a course where students can earn credit. The universities that we are targeting are really unlikely to have been devoting a lot of resources to actuarial education, and so they don't have a full program developed. They maybe don't have actuaries on faculty. So building this course is going to be a big lift, and we expect that the Society of Actuaries will be working with them. And it could be for a variety of things as they need it. It could be as simple as advice. It might be help marketing to those populations of students, or it might even be funding an actuary to be adjunct faculty to teach the FM course, because they probably don't have actuaries on staff. So what's really important, though, is that while the university doesn't have to satisfy all of the requirements to be a CAE school, the course that's taught for FM must meet all of the same requirements that the CAE schools applying for UEC have to meet as well. So there's nothing lesser there. The students are going to be held to the same standard, the same marking, all of that sort of thing. It's just it won't be part of a full CAE program. Now we hope that there will be courses available at that university that allow those interested candidates to be prepared to take exam P, so that hopefully they can present to an employer with 2 exams passed. That would be a really good outcome. And as I was just describing, you can tell that there is more ramp up time needed to get these programs in place because they don't really exist today. So the timing for the first semester that they would be able to offer such a course would be a year later than the program at our CAE universities. Okay, we're going to move into a Q&A time, and Sheree will facilitate that, but I'm going to take the opportunity to kind of jumpstart the Q&A by talking about some of the questions that are the ones that are most frequently coming into us or that we're hearing about. So hopefully these will be helpful for you as well. So one question is, are the current CAEs elite universities? that are inaccessible to most students or diverse students in particular. So we have 33 CAE universities. Only 5 of those are actually private schools. The rest are publicly funded universities. And their actuarial programs, some of them are quite small, some of them are quite large. So they vary from like graduating 10 to 15 actuaries each year up to programs that graduate 150 actuaries per year. So wide range in size. Several of them are in urban locations where more diversity of student body is possible, and others are in smaller towns. And one of the things that's really different is 20 to 30 years ago in the United States, there really were very few comprehensive actuarial science programs. I know when I was in university, that would have been the case. Now there really are a strong number who meet these standards to be a Center of Actuarial Excellence, and there are many more who are fielding actuarial programs. We call them our UCAP schools, our universities and colleges with actuarial programs. It's a very sophisticated acronym, UCAP. And they also educate a lot of actuaries, and they haven't quite reached that bar of CAE yet. But we're actually hoping this may motivate them to reconsider and perhaps to take this opportunity and take it to their dean or the president of their university to ask for more funding, to if it's maybe they need more time to do research or they need another actuary on faculty or whatever the hurdle is for them, maybe they can get a little more support from their university and be able to become a CAE school. So another question is, will UEC replace SOA exams? And we really don't think it will. It's just another pathway. So there's several reasons for this. I mean, first off, there will be people who go to schools that don't have actuarial programs, and that doesn't mean we don't want them to be actuaries. So of course, exams will be their path. We'll have people who find out about it too late to make that decision, even if they are at a school that offers an actuarial program. Or we have people who won't meet the pass mark on that exam, and they're in the actuarial program, they're getting a great education, but they need to do a little more work before they're ready to pass the exam. So they can take the exam. And then of course we have people who actually change careers to become actuaries, and our exams will be their path as well. And all of that kind of diversity is important to the profession as well. So you have people coming in with different educational backgrounds and different even career backgrounds and different skill sets. So it's going to continue to be really important that we have our exam pathway and that it's kept up to date and it's fully functional. A lot of concerns raised about grade inflation at universities, and the task force was very worried about that as well. So we have a lot of details in place. The program will adhere to a strict quality and rigor requirements like those you expect on the SOA exams. We'll have that oversight committee that we've talked about, and then our carefully trained external examiners who are SOA members who will be reviewing the final exams and making sure that they are in fact comprehensive, that they're at a deep enough level, and we'll be setting the pass mark to make sure that it's stiff enough, tough enough. And some of the other requirements will be to look at the testing situation like Gina described, to make sure that there's not going to be cheating going on or anything like that. And there's also an accreditation actuary that's a member of the faculty, that's also a member of the Society of Actuaries, who will be the touch point at the university. And they'll work with the external examiners to review the coursework, the syllabi, and all the exams. So we want to make sure that there isn't any concern over grade inflation. It will not be sufficient just to get an A in the class or just to pass the class. You're going to have to get a certain pass mark on each of the exams. And however the professor marks your grade for the university can be separate from whether the Society of Actuaries said it's good enough to get exam credit or not. So there's been concern that maybe this was just about increasing revenue for the Society of Actuaries, because in order to claim their credit, candidates have to pay what they would have paid for an exam. And note that there's lots of programs that decrease the cost for students who are currently in university and for our diverse students. So they would pay that reduced price. it's not a revenue generator. As you've listened to us describe all of the site visits that will take place and funding the trips with the external examiner, there will be a lot of program expenses to do this. We'll have more frequent reviews of the universities. Under CAE, it was once every 5 years. Under this program, it'll be once every 3 years. So there'll be some increase in expenses that offset that revenue. And then the first question really that everybody wants to know, all of us who are actuaries, is this going to be easier than taking exams? And really, we're not trying to make it easier. We're trying to make it more efficient. And we really want to be able to ensure employers that that candidate who gets credit through their university exam would have passed the exam. And we're just removing that hurdle for them, which I guess in some ways makes it easier. It makes it less of a pain, but it doesn't lower the standard in any way. We still have the same expectations for their mastery of the material. But hopefully we will retain some of those students who didn't want to take that extra step that seemed redundant. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Sheree because I'm sure that you have some additional questions for us as well.
I definitely do. We're having some questions that are coming in. So we're going to move to our Q&A portion. So those of you who are going to be helping to answer some questions are going to come online. You're going to see them pop up now. So please do send in your questions. We're going to get started here on talking about AQ and EQ. So regarding the inclusion of AQ, EQ, is that a requirement across the program or across courses corresponding to the UEC?
So that's really that's a requirement across their whole program, not specifically about any one course or the course that any exam is tied to necessarily.
And about the importance of AQ, EQ, can you talk, I know you mentioned this earlier, but can you talk a little bit more about why this is such a factor in considering in the UEC program?
Well, I'll start, and I'm sure that other people can add more context as well. So we've definitely gotten feedback from employers about what role they see actuaries playing in the future. And as actuaries are working more with really large models and artificial intelligence, maybe they're working with the data scientists, the idea about how to use judgment and really add value with their recommendations and their evaluation of models and all of that kind of information is a lot more of what the role of the actuary is going to be. And so important to have those skills. Also communication skills, that's we've heard from employers for forever. But that, the ability to adapt going forward to the new things that will be required. And yeah, Stuart.
We've heard this, Greg Heydrich, we've heard this continuously from employers, Sheree. They really, really emphasize the importance of those communication skills. They emphasize how much the world is changing and markets are changing, so the adaptability skills. And one of the key roles that we see for actuaries in the future is to serve as business translators between those data scientists and the business side of an organization. Actuaries probably understand the products that an insurance company is selling better than almost anybody else in the company. And so they're really ideally positioned for that. So that's why employers tell us that those skills are just so essential today, and why we feel like we've got to reflect that in the early training that actuaries get.
Excellent, thank you. So we have some questions that really get into some of the details about the program. One is, would the review of exams and the setting of pass marks be much earlier in advance, say at the beginning of the semester, or would it be continuously throughout the semester?
Yes, part of the external examiner's role will be to review the final exams very early. We're anticipating right now prior to the start of the semester, or at the very least in the early part of the semester. What we want to avoid is situation where a professor might not get to certain material through the course for whatever reasons, and then an exam being created late in the semester that doesn't include all of the exam topics that we needed to include and the rigorous questions that we'll want to be on it. So we'll be looking at those exams early on, either prior to the start of the semester or at the very beginning of the semester.
Okay. And also a question about, is there more information about the percentage needed for university earned credit?
So the actual mark, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I'll take that one. We have not set a specific mark. That will be the work of the oversight committee as they meet to determine all the rules that go with the program. So to be determined.
Okay, thank you. So here's a question we heard this afternoon too. Does the university need to offer a degree program in actuarial sciences or related to be awarded CAE status? Can they offer subjects required by non-actuarial programs that also cover the material in the preliminary examinations?
So CAE schools, by virtue of meeting the first criteria to be a CAE, need to have a degree program in actuarial science, or at least a concentration in actuarial science. I'm not sure the second part of the question, but I think what they might be asking is that, can someone who is in a different degree program at the university, are they eligible for this? And they might be if they are fully involved in the actuarial program that the school offers, because again, we do want them to have the benefit of all the attributes of the CAE program. That's why the CAEs have been selected. But they might be in the bachelor's program, they might be in a master's program. Those could both be eligible. We would allow even part-time if it is a degree program.
Thank you. Do you see all of the other exams, the other 6 exams from Exam P to be eligible for UEC in the future? I know that there's some work that still needs to be done on determining which exams will be covered.
Right. So Ken, you wanted to, I don't want to take them all.
Yeah, that's fine. So we see that probably somewhere between either 3 or 4 exams of the preliminary exam set, excluding Exam B, will be within the program that these universities will be delivering courses for. But in that question, they've specifically singled out predictive analytics, a predictive analytics course and exam, and I can say categorically that will not be included within the set that we will offer up under this program. So it'll be 3 to 4 preliminary exams only.
Okay. This should be a quick one. Do CAEs pay a fee to apply for the UEC program once they apply?
No, they don't.
And do university professors teaching UEC courses need to be SOA credentialed actuaries?
There is a requirement for CAE schools that they have a certain contingent of credentialed actuaries on staff, but not all faculty need to be credentialed actuaries. And then, as we noted, the accreditation actuary will need to be an SOA member credentialed.
Okay, so due to the 2-year opportunity to pay for credit or to apply for credit, is the expectation or goal that employers will be paying for candidates' UEC fees, exam fees?
So we don't specifically have a goal around this, but the information from other places that have programs like this is that employers often do end up doing that. And we had on our task force, we had an actuary who is very much involved in recruiting at her company. And she thought they probably would, because it's really not that expensive in the scheme of recruiting somebody, because you know that it's not will they pass or not, they already have earned the credit. And in fact, it could actually be a recruiting tool from employers, because it's something they could offer to candidates that they find to be attractive. But it's not a requirement, they do, and I'm sure some employers will choose to do it and some won't.
Oh, and this is a very popular question, and I'll remind everyone who's on the, and I'll let you know again later too. We do have an FAQ that is covering a lot of the questions that you're asking. So we will be updating that FAQ with these questions here and keeping that up to date. So do check back there. But here's a popular question. Is the program retroactive? Will students currently enrolled at a CAE that eventually is approved for UEC be eligible to participate?
No, unfortunately not. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, and recall that that part of the program is having the exam scrutinized and the grades scrutinized and the candidates going through, knowing from day one of their experience in the course that they're not only working towards their school grade, but meeting SOA requirements. So applying it retroactively would just be extremely difficult to be able to do it and maintain the fairness to all that we want from the program.
And, you know, along those lines, how will the SOA handle academic integrity issues versus the security protocols already in place in the CBT environment? So part of the reason why we're starting with CAEs and you know, having said that we're starting with them, the expectation is that's where you know, the program is not expected to go beyond that. There are lots of reasons why that would be the case. You've heard, of course, about the diversity program. That's a little different, but in terms of comprehensive programs, it's the CAEs we're looking at. The reason why we're operating with those particular universities is because we know that they've got very good processes around exam formation, around exam security, making sure that they take appropriate steps when if anyone's caught trying to cheat in an exam. So we're confident that they have good processes. We've been working with that CAE group of universities for many years now, and so their standards are on a par with what we do in our CBT environment. It's true to say that the CBT environment is consistent across the globe, and so therefore, you know, and there are set rules, much harder to cheat in that environment. But with the CAEs, we know that the exams are going to be proctored. We know that there's going to be very careful scrutiny of what students do, and so we can trust the results. Thank you. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So we have a question here that says that currently their understanding, the questioner's understanding is the SOA recognizes and waives exemptions earned with the IFOA, the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in the UK, and the Australian Actuaries Institute. Would this recognition be continued moving forward? Yeah, it will be. I mean, at this point, there's no plan to change that arrangement, and they're exactly right in pulling out those two organizations. We have a mutual recognition agreement with the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in the UK and the Australian Institute of Actuaries in Australia, and those two arrangements will continue for the foreseeable future. This might be a good time to ask this question. Programs like this have been considered by the SOA in the past. What is different about this program and about this time?
So I'll start here and then other people can add other details as well. I happen to have been on the SOA board the last time this was considered. And it's really, things are so different now because we have the close relationships with CAEs. That program was just getting started at that point. So we didn't know, you know, it was experimental. We didn't know how it was going to go. Now we have really strong relationships. We understand what they're teaching. They've been meeting standards. We've been watching their candidates pass exams. They know what we expect of them. And also our candidate membership has gotten much more international in where they are, where they're taking exams, where they're being educated. And they have access to programs like this in many of those locations from other actuarial organizations. So we recognize that, you know, we really, if we want to compete for those strong students, we need to provide this opportunity for them as well.
And I would say, I would add, the world is just changing in general. You know, the challenges facing the profession from all sorts of forces. Jennifer's touched on them in her opening remarks, but, you know, the rise of data science, the adoption of AI, the changing nature of demands on actuaries within their organizations, demand for AQ and EQ skills we talked about, that's all changing. And it means that we really have to look very hard at what's in the pathway, how we're preparing actuaries, what we can make room for in the pathway for additional predictive analytics or data science related training, for example, or for more of those AQ, EQ skills. So we really have to continue to respond to those pressures in order for the training we offer and for the profession to remain relevant to employers now and in the future.
Thank you both. So another question is that just in general, how will quality and equity be assured across different CAE universities and professors?
I think that starts with the training that we were talking about for our external examiners. That will be very thorough, as we mentioned, from the oversight committee and from education volunteers that are currently overseeing exams and SOA staff, to ensure that the external examiners are well trained to follow all the rules that we've talked about today on the presentation, and to ensure that they are happening across the schools. We'll also be having those external examiners meet as a group in sessions periodically to coordinate and ensure that everyone is treating each school the same to the extent that we can possibly do, to ensure that all are following the rules the same way.
Excellent, thank you. So if a student earns credit at a UEC program at an approved CAE and does not attain the degree from that university, they make a change for some reason, can they still apply for the credit?
They can. As long as they were a degree seeking student at the time they earned the credit, they can still apply for that within the 2-year period. If they, for some reason, don't finish the degree or transfer somewhere else, we're not going to penalize them for that.
Okay. Let's shift a little bit and talk about who the UEC does not directly impact. A lot of questions from career changers, students who are not at CAEs. How does this impact them? Does it? And what types of situations might they find themselves in? Jennifer, I don't know you're not a career changer, but I know you didn't go to an actuarial science program either. So, I mean, a lot of them are wondering where do I fit into all of this, and what are the benefits to me, if any?
Right. So I just went to a small liberal arts school, definitely not an actuarial program. I didn't know about it when I was a high school student, heard about it when I was in college. I think this is still true for lots of people today. And even people who have heard about it may be choosing to go to a different college or university than a CAE. The pathway is still very much open to them. And in fact, when we talk about diversity, there's lots of kinds of diversity. And some of that is in maybe you have a really interesting other major, or you did pursue a different career. I know we have people that were teachers is a really common one, and maybe kind of burned out on that or got excited about the actuarial program at some point and switch over. Maybe they were doing another job in an insurance company, and then they find out about actuarial science and realize that would have been a good fit. And so then they start taking exams. And so it's really important that that pathway stays open for all of those people, because they're all important to the profession, and they all bring value with their different perspectives and somewhat different training and expertise. They all bring different value for employers. So our pathway will stay open. We're going to keep it modern and up to date, and the assistance for people that are learning with self-study will continue to be offered out there.
Excellent, thank you. Ken, is there anything that I know that, as part of our announcement to members, we did talk about that we do have some upcoming announcements in regards to the modernization and the modularization of the SOA, pathway. So while we're, not prepared to talk about, what the details of those are, is there anything that you want to say to, to any of those who are career changers or not CAE candidates, to let them know that we're paying attention to their needs as well?
So yeah, nice opportunity to say a few things. We've got some plans that are going to the next board meeting in June that if the board approves them, we'll be able to make announcements in late June or early July about some changes that we're proposing for the curriculum to ASA and also the curriculum from ASA to FSA. And they're seen in different segments because we've conducted a comprehensive job analysis for what for the future, the next 5 years or so out, for what's going to be required for all actuaries, and that kind of covers the curriculum up to ASA, and then within each specialist track, what are the specialization, what specific content needs to be included in the specialization tracks, again going out 5 years or more into the future. So we've got that data. We've got task forces that have been looking very closely at that and seeking to work out what new content needs to be added, what content now is no longer as relevant as it once was and can be removed, and what kind of way we can perhaps streamline a little bit the pathway to ASA and then onwards from there to FSA. So we've got some proposals that we're unfortunately not able to comment on in any detail now, but they'll go to the board in June, and if they're approved, there'll be an announcement, late in June, early July about where we're headed. But we're very much thinking about the kinds of competitive pressures the profession is now under. So the things that Jennifer said at the beginning, Greg said, picked up some additional comments here too. That there is this pressure on the profession from some other professions, from introduction of AI and the like, that things are going to be a little different in the future. We need to make sure that we're making adjustments to the credentialing program to prepare actuaries well for those changes.
And I would just add, we've observed outside of the actuarial profession, there is a huge move in adult education and professional education generally towards more credentials, more ways of demonstrating knowledge, and a lot of just-in-time learning. We all see that in our workplaces and in the kinds of programs that our colleagues may be taking on. And actuaries, people involved in actuarial education, actuarial pathways have the same needs. So we're really, as Ken has said very well, we're really focused on that and making sure that we're able to respond very fully to that.
Thank you both. So I've got some more questions that are coming in. And one of them is that why aren't university courses that are approved for UEC required to just give a uniform exam as opposed to creating an exam on their own to be reviewed before the course is given?
So I guess I can think of at least a couple of reasons, and I'm sure that Ken can add some more probably, but they're not all giving exams on the same day, like when we give an actuarial exam. So the security of the knowledge of what those questions are, we certainly wouldn't want that being passed around from university to university or something. So, it's not practical like that, as well as the fact that while they're required to cover 85% of our syllabus, the other 15% can be what they think fits in the course. So they aren't going to be teaching all exactly the same things. And so they may, wish to have questions on their exam that are that other 15%. So they need to have room to do that.
I'd add to that.
Go.
Doing so would essentially defeat the core purpose of the program. If they're all taking the same exam, they might as well just take the SOA exam at the end, and we're right back where we started. We want the professors to give the kind of questions that'll challenge their students and use test-taking mechanisms that might not be uniformly available. So for example, if they have access for students to use fully working computers on the exam and can give them Excel or R or Python-based problems, they can go ahead and do that. They're not restricted to kind of the lowest common denominator as to some degree we are when we have to give the same exam everywhere in the world.
Thank you. So a question about accommodations. Can you speak about how students will receive accommodations? University standards and SOA standards for accommodations may be different. How do you account for that?
I think that's a really good question, actually, because there are differences. That's absolutely right. That's something the Oversight Committee will need to look closely at. We'll seek to standardize that to the degree that we can, because we do have, a clear policy with the SOA based on, certain evidence, and some universities are, have different approaches to that. We'll seek to put a standardized approach in for these kinds of exams. So that is one of the things that the Oversight Committee will have to take a close look at.
Thank you. So with the implementation of this program, do you anticipate that students will be graduating with credit for more exams than they generally do today? What impact do you anticipate, depending on what your answer to that is, having on employers and hiring?
I think it is possible for some of these top students to graduate with more exams, and I think that's something that we're trying to facilitate to kind of make it more efficient, as Jennifer talked about, for some of these students, some of these bright students that are going to score high scores in these UEC courses. So yes, I think it has the potential to bump up the number of exams they graduate with. I don't know that, because it's still, even if they were taking the courses and then taking SOA exams after them, they would still probably take the same courses throughout university that they will be now. So I'm not sure that they would, it would just kind of eliminate, if they had to fail and had to retake, if they passed the UEC mark, then they would get credit immediately. So, or when they applied.
Yeah, so I don't think we think it's going to be a dramatic change, because we certainly have candidates that are graduating with a good number already. Hopefully we're going to retain some people that we would have lost, so that will change the statistics a bit. And right, some will get another exam or two that they wouldn't have gotten under their belt by graduation.
I would think employers will adjust pretty quickly to it. Many, any international employer, multinational employer, actuarial employers probably already dealing with this issue today in their hiring, since the use of this type of an approach is so prevalent in Canada and in parts of Asia and of course in Europe. So I think the employers will adjust pretty quickly to this.
Okay, so this might be more of a question for the communications person here, but how will this information be available for prospective students so they can make plans to attend a university approved for UEC if that's of interest to them? What kind of outreach do you think would be made to high school students? Is that part of the plan going forward?
I think we definitely would want to make students aware and candidates aware. As soon as we start approving CAE universities, then that information will be shared on our website. Yeah, a good question about the outreach and what we might do marketing wise. Sheree, would you like to respond to that one?
Well, I know that, stay tuned. There's certainly, there's a lot of outreach that we do currently do, but yes, as programs like this come online, that is certainly, a huge part of what we do at the SOA, not only on the SOA's behalf, but also working with our partners like the CAE universities in order to help them determine, the best kind of outreach. And, another question that we have here is also talking about how do we ensure students from all backgrounds are able to make the decision to attend a CAE and take advantage of these types of programs. And I know we had talked about the diversity extension program of this. Do we want to talk a little bit more? I know that those are details that are still underway. However, it certainly does have a huge impact on being able to reach out to students, from underrepresented groups. So any thoughts from the group on the development of that program?
Well, I want to build on something you said, Sheree, and challenge everybody that's on this call, is that we all have a role to do in communicating to high school students coming up about the actuarial profession, because they may not have heard about it unless they hear about it from their neighbor or somebody that comes back to talk at their high school or does a community career fair, or all of those different opportunities that you get to talk to young people so that they understand what the actuarial profession is and that they know about CAE schools and opportunities there. So we all have something to do with the communication, if it's more on a little bit more casual basis.
Well, Gina, you had mentioned in another conversation we were having about this, about the university outreach volunteers. Can you tell, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more from everybody about the types of volunteer opportunities that anyone on this call has, who's listening in, to participate and to, help out with this type of outreach.
Yes, so if anyone listening is interested in being a mentor to a university program, not necessarily a CAE, but some of the ones that are maybe more developing universities, we do have a program at the SOA called the University Support Actuary Program, and a number of actuaries are already connected with their local universities and provide mentoring for students, bring issues and thoughts to faculty at universities about, what's going on in the workplace, what are some good things for students to know, tips on interviewing for internships and jobs for students, et cetera. We provide training and PowerPoint presentations for you to go on campus and share with them, about the SOA and some of the latest things going on at the SOA. So if anyone's interested in that, please write into the membercomms at SOA.org box that Sheree will remind you again about at the end of the call, and ask us, and we can route you to that opportunity.
And I will mention a couple of other opportunities. There is the Math Motivators program with the Actuarial Foundation, obviously supported by the Society of Actuaries and the other actuarial organizations. And this is, you can go to their website and look to see if there's a program near you. This is, and they do offer virtual tutoring at this point in time, as schools are challenged, with in-person and virtual teaching. And there's also, we do have high school actuarial days that are virtual. And we're always looking for individuals and actuaries who are interested in coming and helping to participate in that program. And that could be anything from helping to determine what the curriculum for that high school and for those high schools might be, to volunteering for online workshops with high school students. So there are lots of opportunities. And again, if you're interested in any of those, you can email us at membercomms@soa.org, and we'd be happy to connect you with any of those opportunities. So a question about exchange students. So incoming exchange students taking an approved course in the host university, a CAE UEC program, can also earn the UEC credits using their transcripts?
I don't think that's something that we've talked about at the task force level. We talked about transfer students, but exchange students in the sense that they'd only be there temporarily. I'm thinking that's what's meant by this. So that is probably something that the oversight committee would need to nail down more specifically. And these issues will come up periodically after we roll out the program, that we'll have to make policy decisions on, but that would be handled by the oversight committee.
Yeah, I'll just add that if they're international students and they're enrolled in the university proper, then yeah, absolutely. If they get the required mark, they'll get that credit. But if they're an exchange student just for perhaps a semester or a year, that might be a little different. We'd need to take a look at that. That's something for the oversight committee for sure.
I know some of the CAEs have programs set up with international schools, international universities, where a student might do 2 years at their home university and then come to the CAE and complete their degree there. In those cases, I would expect that we would be providing the credit if they earned it.
Yep.
What impact does the UEC program have on travel time to ASA?
We don't know yet. That will be something we'll be watching data for to find out. Hopefully it'll shorten it a little bit.
Yeah, I would hope it would shorten it, but you know, we've got, I mean, we've got counter pressures here. We're trying to also allow room for, you know, for some additional data science learning in the pathway and the AQ, EQ learning that we've talked about. But you know, that pathway does need to be shortened. It does need to start coming down. It's quite lengthy, as any candidate knows, and so hope it has that effect a little bit, but it's not the main purpose for this particular development.
Well, one of those things that unfortunately comes with taking exams is, what if a candidate fails a UEC exam? Do they retake it at the university, or do they need to study again and take it from the SOA? What happens then?
So they probably have both of those as options. So just because you don't achieve the SOA pass mark, you could have gotten an A in the course or a B in the course or something. It doesn't mean you failed the course by any means, because we're setting that very high mark. Most universities would allow you to repeat a course to get a higher grade. So you could probably take the course over, or you can take, you know, you've gotten a good foundation presumably from taking the course, and now you do your own self-study to prepare for taking an SOA exam to get credit for that subject matter, and that would be available to them too.
Okay, so do you anticipate that all CAE schools will apply?
Over time, we hope so. We actually would be maybe just as happy if we don't get all 33 this first year due to the amount of resources required for that. But as I mentioned, we are already accepting expressions of interest from CAE and have a good number already coming in. So we anticipate, you know, we'll have a good starting group and then hopefully add the rest over the next few years. And one other thing I should add to that is there are a lot of schools as part of our universities and college actuarial program group, our UCAP schools, some that are very close to CAE now that we hope that this new development may be the incentive for them to apply for CAE and grow their programs to the CAE level. So we hope, you know, we'll add to the number of CAEs over time as well.
So a couple of questions about, and this should be pretty easy to answer. Where do I find more information on the schools with actuarial programs, CAE, and eventually UEC?
So on the SOA website, in the education vertical or the education tab, if you open that pane, you'll see over on the right-hand side some links to the universities and colleges with actual programs. The UCAP list is housed there. That includes the CAE schools as well. There's a separate link for CAE schools. Through the CAE school link, you will find the university earned credit, the UEC information. And we've put out there an overview of the program as we know it today. And this is, you know, again, prior to the oversight committee really fine tuning it. And we also have the FAQs that Sheree mentioned out there. So, and we'll add to that information as we develop more. And as I mentioned, the application materials that the CAE schools will need to submit will be out there by July.
And is the expression of interest form available on the SOA website for CAEs? How does someone obtain and be able to express interest to participate?
So our academic administrator, Tiffany Tatsumi, has already sent the form to all the schools, so they all have access to it already. All the CAE schools have the form. We had a special webinar with the CAE schools and informed them of the program and their opportunities to submit the form, so they have that and are sending them in now.
So is there some other way, Gina, if it didn't get to the right person or that person's on sabbatical or something, that a school can get another copy?
So reaching out to Tiffany at the CAE mailbox, so cae@soa.org would be a great way to find that.
Excellent. So I'm looking and it appears that we've covered pretty much all the questions. Thank you everybody so much for sending in your questions. It's been a really great discussion. You've certainly kept our panel super busy. So at this point in time, unless we don't have any other questions that are coming in, I would love to extend my thank you to Jennifer and to Gina for your leadership and expertise on the presentation today. And thank you to Greg and Ken and Stuart for joining us on the Q&A. And of course, a special thank you to all of our members who attended today and submitted questions. This concludes the UEC webinar, member webinar for this evening or this morning, depending on where you are in the world. If you have additional questions or comments, you can always send them to the SOA at membercomms@soa.org. And I'm going to spell that out for you just in case. It's membercomms@soa.org. For a recording of this webinar, a detailed program descriptions and FAQs, you can visit SOA.org. We'll be posting them there, and we'll also be including links to those in upcoming member communications. So keep an eye on your SOA News Weekly and your Candidate Connects. And thank you again, and enjoy your evening or enjoy your day. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.